They're completely overcrowded. They cannot recruit staff fast enough to fill the spaces left by people who are leaving, who you don't want to work inside a brutalizing environment where there are far too few staff, they're far too inexperienced. We were told in an inspection report back in 2022 by the Chief Inspector of Prisons about Wandsworth, an excoriating report that typically between 30 and 44% of the staff who were supposed to be there on duty every day weren't available for various reasons to be deployed. Well, it's an interesting development. I think people have been right to resist intense speculation about whether or not other people were involved, or indeed foreign state actors were involved in this man's escape. But I think the principal thing here is whether Khalife is found in a ditch in Richmond Park or in a press conference in Tehran. This is a spectacular and embarrassing failure for the prison service that should be a wake-up call to ministers and to the wider public, because it reveals actually a very much deeper malaise and crisis that spans all of our prisons, including the high security estate, where a lot of people are suggesting Khalife should have been placed in the first place, that are also under extreme pressure and have been the result of disastrous inspections quite recently by the Chief Inspector of Prisons. And those are the places that hold our most dangerous terrorist risk in the country.
Take us inside Wandsworth Prison then, Ian, in terms of, we are fascinated with how this could happen, that he was strapped underneath a van. I suppose, can you just sort of guide us through what happens when a van shows up in this way to drop off a delivery? How does the van get in? What protocols are in place? Just describe what happens.
Okay, well, I can certainly tell you what should happen and should have happened. Whether or not that's the case is subject to an inquiry. But, basically what you want in a prison is as few security risks to the perimeter as possible. So you have very few entrances to a prison, because that's where you have your highest degree of vulnerability. Of course, there has to be an entrance to a prison, particularly a prison like Wandsworth, which is a reception prison for courts and has multiple vans going in and out every day, court vans that are taking prisoners to and from courts. So those vans and other vehicles, including vehicles making deliveries, would go into what would effectively be a vehicle lock in the gatehouse. That means that once they go through the big iconic double gates, the front of Wandsworth, those are closed. But before that van can advance any further, it is another series of double gates that are locked to go through. And before that happens, obviously the identity of the vehicle and its authorization to be into the prison is examined. And there will be staff in the gatehouse whose specific task is to search that van going into the prison and to search it coming out, because of course we want to stop illicit items going into the prison as well as illicit people getting out of it. So you will have typically one or two operational support grades, which are the lowest grade of prison uniformed staff who do many of the security tasks, and they'll be inside that vehicle lock, and they will have mirrors and to look underneath the vehicle. And there will be a mirror that's in the gate lodge on the top of the ceiling to be able to look at the top of the vehicle. As soon as that vehicle is cleared to move forward into the prison, then those other inner gates are opened, and that vehicle will have a vehicle escort. They will have to seek permission from the control room in order to move to its location and do whatever it's in the building, in the institution to do. So that would happen with the permission of the control room. And obviously, as you would expect, this is a Category B prison, which is a relatively high security prison in its own right. The whole interior of the prison is covered by CCTV. So that vehicle would then be watched to its destination. So if we take the example of what happened with Khalife, the vehicle would be escorted to the kitchen, goods would be removed, and what should have happened before that vehicle was then escorted back into the gate lodge is that the role was declared correct by the person who was managing the area, the kitchen, the catering manager, or prison staff who worked for that person. So all those prisoners were accounted for before that vehicle moved back into the gate, and the reverse process happened, including the search of the vehicle underneath it and above it, before it was able to leave the prison. So you can see that in order for escape to have happened, there would have to have been almost bizarre levels of failure of multiple human, procedural and physical barriers to allow Khalife to exit the prison.
Which is the fascinating thing of what you outline there, Ian, as you say, that there has to be a whole number of breaches of those protocols, which I suppose begs the question, in your time when you were head of security, did you witness shortcuts being taken, perhaps? Is there an element to which these protocols cannot be followed as thoroughly as they should be?
Well, I think when you're comparing when I was head of security at Wandsworth in the mid-90s to today, you're really comparing two completely different environments. We were certainly completely in charge of the entire institution. Back in the mid-90s, there were sufficient and suitable numbers of staff who were clearly and confidently in charge. And you've only got to look at the appalling reports, which of course have been in the hands of ministers over the last number of years about Wandsworth and some of our other prisons, to see that you have basically places like this that are in free fall. They're completely overcrowded. They cannot recruit staff fast enough to fill the spaces left by people who are leaving, who don't want to work inside a brutalizing environment where there are far too few staff, they're far too inexperienced. We were told in an inspection report back in 2022 by the Chief Inspector of Prisons about Wandsworth, an excoriating report that typically between 30 and 44% of the staff who were supposed to be there on duty every day weren't available for various reasons to be deployed. Now, when you've got that few number of staff looking after the security of an institution that holds well over 1,000 prisoners, and morale, which was self-reported in the latest report, is so low, and there's such a low perception by staff who responded to the survey the inspector put out in relation to whether they thought they were cared about by their bosses, you've got a recipe for something like this to happen, regardless of whether there's a sort of James Bond dimension to this, or indeed there are other actors involved. It's quite what surprises me, frankly, Callum, is not that this has happened, but that it hasn't happened everywhere else or worse.
Gosh, Ian, it's really, really fascinating to speak to you. Thank you very much.